was the last person to leave the Harwood Carnival alive, but I didn't come out alone. Something from the Funhouse followed me, and for 20 years I've been listening to its whispers in the dark. The Grand Carousel's final ride. My name is Leo, and I was the carousel operator at the Harwood Halloween Carnival. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I loved it. There was a simple, honest magic to it. The gleam of the brass poles, the hypnotic swirl of the painted horses, prancing stallions, fierce dragons, majestic griffins, the warm, electric smell of the motor, and the cheerful, wheezing music of the calliope. It was a pocket of pure, uncomplicated joy in a world that often felt short on it. I knew every splinter on the platform, every chip of paint on the menagerie, every note of the looping carnival tunes. Especially Pop Goes the Weasel. That was the carousel song. It was its heartbeat. The night of the fire started like any other. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, smelling of candied apples and wood smoke. Kids squealed with laughter, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks and pretty makeup. I just started a new cycle, and the carousel was a spinning jewel under the twinkling fairy lights, filled with a fresh batch of riders. A young couple sharing a dragon, a little girl death-gripping the mane of a sparkling unicorn, a trio of teenagers joking loudly on the chariot. I gave them my usual wave as the platform began to turn, the mechanism beneath my feet humming with familiar, reliable life. The first sign something was wrong wasn't a scream or an alarm. It was a smell. Underneath the sugar and the chill night air, a new scent coiled, acrid, oily, and unmistakably wrong. It was the smell of something electrical burning, not clean wood, but plastic and wiring. I leaned out of my operator's booth, my eyes scanning the crowded midway. Then I saw it, a thick black plume of smoke snaking into the sky from behind the haunted house, followed by a sudden panicked surge in the crowd's noise. A wave of heat, thick and oppressive, rolled across the carnival, carrying with it the first embers, glowing like angry fireflies. Chaos erupted. The orderly lines dissolved into a screaming, shoving river of terror. My own heart hammered against my ribs. I had to stop the ride. I had to let these people off. I turned back to my control panel, a simple box with a large red stop button. I slammed my palm onto it. Nothing happened. The carousel didn't even stutter. The cheerful wheezing notes of Pop Goes the Weasel continued to play, and the platform kept spinning. A cold dread, sharper than any fear of the fire, pierced through me. I hit the button again and again, my fist pounding on the unresponsive plastic. I threw the main power switch. The lights on the carousel flickered but stayed on. The music played. The ride spun on. "Get off!" I screamed, leaning out over the platform, my voice raw. "Jump!" But it was too late for that. The carousel was already moving too fast. The familiar, gentle rotation had begun to accelerate. The hum of the motor deepened into a menacing growl, and the painted horses weren't prancing anymore. They were lunging, their frozen gallops becoming a violent, dizzying blur. The riders' initial confusion had curdled into pure, primal fear. Their screams began to weave into the music, a horrifying counter-melody. The fire found us then. It raced along the canopy above the carousel, hungry tongues of flame licking down the support poles. The heat became a physical force, searing my lungs with every breath. The painted scenes on the rounding boards began to blister and blacken, idyllic countryside vistas transforming into landscapes of hell. I saw the little girl on the unicorn, her face a mask of tears and soot, her small hands still glued to the pole as her horse began to smolder. And then the music changed. The calliope, superheated by the encroaching flames, began to warp. The cheerful tune of Pop Goes the Weasel stretched and distorted, the notes sliding into discordant, shrieking wails. It was a sound that clawed at the inside of my skull, a mockery of the joy it once represented. Pop Goes the Weasel. The pop was a scream, the weasel a dying metallic groan. The world became a vortex of fire and sound and melting color. The carousel was a spinning disk of damnation, a centrifuge of agony. I watched, paralyzed, as the figures on the platform began to lose their definition. The vibrant yellows, reds, and blues of the horses melted and ran like wet watercolors, dripping onto the screaming riders beneath them. The plastic manes and tails caught fire, becoming streaming torches. The couple on the dragon were engulfed in a single sheet of flame, their two separate screams merging into one horrific sound before being swallowed by the roar of the inferno. The air filled with the nauseating, sweet smell of burning paint and something else something organic and utterly wrong. I was a prisoner in my own booth, the heat blistering the skin on my face and hands. The centrifugal force pinned me against the wall, my vision tunneling. The last thing I saw with any clarity was the carousel, spinning at an impossible, terrifying speed. The horses were no longer recognizable as animals. They were blackened, skeletal shapes, fused with their riders into a single, rotating sculpture of pure suffering, a grotesque monument set to the soundtrack of a demonic music box. I must have been thrown clear when the roof finally gave way. They found me 30 feet away, buried in ash and debris, the only one pulled alive from the wreckage of the carousel. They call me a miracle. I don't feel like one, because in my dreams every single night, I'm back there. I feel the unbearable heat, I smell the burning sugar and scorched metal, and I hear it. I hear the distorted, shrieking notes of that song. And I feel the spin, the endless, violent, accelerating spin. I wake up dizzy, my stomach lurching, the echoes of a melody that didn't just play, but consumed, ringing in my ears long after the dream is over. The fire took everyone else that night, but the carousel, it never really let me go. Fuel for the fire. My name is Ben, and for 6 seasons I was the janitor inside the asylum haunted house. It was the star attraction of the Harwood Carnival, a sprawling 2-story maze of fabricated terror built from old dry timber and pure human dread. My domain was the boiler room, the final exhibit before the exit. It was a masterpiece of low-budget horror. Cramped, steaming pipes, the constant metallic drip, drip, drip of water, and the thick, coppery smell of fake blood that hung in the humid air. My costume was a grotesque masterpiece, a stained jumpsuit, a distorted latex mask, and I was drenched, head to toe, in a special mixture of corn syrup, red dye, and mineral oil that made me glisten menacingly under the flickering strobe lights. I was a living, breathing monster, and the terror on people's faces as I lunged from the shadows was my nightly reward. The night it happened, the asylum was packed. The line snaked all the way back to the Ferris wheel. I could feel the building groan with the weight of the crowd, the floorboards vibrating with 100 panicked footfalls. The air in the boiler room was thicker than usual, the heat clinging to my plastic mask, making it hard to breathe. I remember a distinct shift, a wrongness that settled in my gut. The screams from the other room started to change. They lost their playful, performative edge and sharpened into something raw, something real. It was no longer, "Ah, you scared me." It was, "Oh God, let me out." Then came the smell. It cut through the fake blood and damp wood, the sharp, undeniable stench of burning plastic and electrical insulation. My first stupid thought was that it was a new effect. But then I saw it, a thin gray tendril of smoke curling from a crack in the ceiling, followed by a soft orange glow that grew with terrifying speed. The sound of the fire was a low, hungry roar, swallowing the pre-recorded moans and distant chainsaws. Panic is a sound. It's a physical force that shreds civility. The orderly, single-file groups of patrons shattered. The narrow corridor outside my room became a screaming, shoving river of bodies, all surging toward the dead end that was the boiler room, thinking it was the way out. They were trapped. We were all trapped. The smoke descended, a choking black fog that stung my eyes and clawed at my throat. I ripped off my mask, gasping for clean air that didn't exist. That's when I felt it. A wave of heat so intense it was like opening a furnace door. It came from the corridor. A flash of flame licked across the ceiling, and with a whoomp that sucked the air from my lungs, my world turned to fire. The mineral oil. The grease in my costume. It ignited instantly. The pain was absolute and unimaginable. It wasn't just on my skin. It was in my mouth, my lungs, my eyes. I was a living candle, doused in gasoline and set alight. A scream tore from my throat, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. A high, shrill, animalistic shriek of pure agony. I was no longer Ben. I was a thing of flame and pain, stumbling blindly in the suffocating darkness. My flailing, burning arms brushed against a woman pressed against the wall. The fire leaped from me to her, eagerly catching her synthetic witch's costume. Her scream joined mine, a new, horrific harmony. I staggered forward, a human torch in a hallway of kindling. Every person I bumped into, every terrified soul I collided with in the pitch-black, smoke-filled hell, became a new wick. I was a contagion, a plague of fire, the sound. God, the sound is what haunts me most. Their screams were identical to the ones we elicited for fun just minutes before. The pre-recorded track was still playing, a ghost in the machine, a loop of manic laughter and spooky whispers now underscoring a genuine massacre. The line between our performance and reality didn't just blur, it was vaporized. We had become the very horror we were paid to imitate. I don't remember dying. My last conscious memory is a kaleidoscope of burning faces, their features melting under the dance of the flames, their wide, terrified eyes reflecting my own blazing form. I felt my own flesh sizzle, my muscles contract, my vision tunneling into a final bright point of agony before everything went silent and dark. But it wasn't the end. Sometimes, when the air is still and the house is quiet, I catch a faint smell of burnt sugar and grease. In the depths of a nightmare, I feel the ghost of that heat, and I hear the echoes of those screams, not just theirs, but my own, a perpetual silent scream from a soul that burned long before my body did. They say I died in the fire, but a part of me is still in that boiler room, forever burning, forever setting the world alight, trapped in a final endless performance for an audience of the damned. The mirror maze of 1,000 flames. My name is Clara. I've always had a thing for mirrors. Not out of vanity, but out of a strange fascination with the other world that exists just on the other side of the glass. That's why, when my boyfriend Mark dragged me to the Harwood Halloween Carnival, I made a beeline for the mirror maze of madness. It was a towering, black canvas structure, its entrance a gaping maw shaped like a laughing jester's face. Mark just rolled his eyes, squeezed my hand, and said, "Don't get lost in there without me," before heading off to win me a stuffed animal I didn't need. The inside was a disorienting wonder. Cold, dry air smelling of dust and glass cleaner. A labyrinth of impeccable, flawless mirrors framed by cheap black velvet. The ceiling was low, oppressive. The only light came from a series of dim, purple bulbs that cast long, dancing shadows. From the moment I stepped in, the world multiplied. 100 Claras turned to look at 100 more, all of us wearing the same slight, curious smile. The sound of my own footsteps was multiplied, a soft, scuffing echo that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I quickly lost all sense of direction. Left, right, another left. Every turn presented me with an infinity of myself. It was mesmerizing at first. I'd wave, and a legion of me would wave back. I'd make a funny face, and it would be replicated into a silent, mocking army. But the fun began to curdle into a low, simmering unease. The reflections were too perfect. Sometimes in the periphery, I'd catch one that seemed a half-second out of sync, or one whose expression was just a little blanker, a little emptier than mine. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the strain on my eyes. Then the smell hit. It was subtle at first, a faint, acrid tang underneath the dust, like a blown fuse. I paused, my own multitude of faces pausing with me. I saw, in the distant reflections of reflections, a flicker of orange. It was there and gone, a fleeting ember in 1,000 glasses. My heart gave a single hard thump. A moment later, the purple lights flickered, buzzed, and died, plunging the maze into a darkness so absolute I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Panic is a taste. It's coppery, like biting your own tongue. I stumbled forward, my hand slapping against cold, smooth glass. Crack. A web of fractures appeared in the mirror I'd hit. From beyond the walls, the screams started. Not the delighted shrieks of the carnival, but raw, ragged, open-throated screams of pure terror. They were reflected and magnified by the maze, coming from every direction, a chorus of the damned. The smoke came next. It poured in, a thick, black, suffocating fog that stung my eyes and clawed at my throat. I dropped to my knees, coughing, the cold floor a small mercy against my skin. And then the fire arrived. It wasn't a single flame. It was an awakening. The far end of the maze I was in ignited, and instantly the fire was everywhere, reflected in 1,000 mirrors. It created the horrifying, inescapable illusion that I was surrounded by a closing circle of inferno on all sides. A wall of flame roared in front of me, and an identical, perfect copy of it roared behind my back. To my left, to my right, above me, there was no escape, only an infinite burning prison. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran from the fire in front of me, only to slam face first into the solid cold glass of a mirror, the image of my own terrified face meeting me an inch from my nose. The impact stunned me. I tasted blood from a split lip. I turned and ran another way, towards a seeming corridor, only to crash into another invisible wall. I was running from my own reflections, and they were hurting me, trapping me. The heat was becoming unbearable. The glass around me began to sweat, then to warp. My reflections distorted, their faces melting like wax, their screams silent, mimed performances of my own. I saw 1,000 versions of me, their hair smoking, their clothes beginning to smolder. The fire was getting closer, the real fire, its heat a physical weight pressing down on me. The first real tongue of flame licked at the velvet frame beside me. It raced upwards, and the mirror it touched didn't just break, it screamed, a high crystalline shriek as the glass superheated and fractured. A shard, long and sharp as a dagger, shot out and embedded itself in my arm. I cried out, and 1,000 bleeding Claras cried out with me. That's when I saw it. The final cruel trick of the maze. As the fire engulfed my corridor, I was faced with one last perfect wall of mirrors. And in it, I didn't see a terrified girl. I saw 1,000 of them, each one already ablaze. Their skin blackened and peeled, their hair became halos of fire. Their mouths were open in a silent, endless shriek of agony. The last thing I would ever see was not the face of God or a memory of my life. It was an infinity of my own death playing out in perfect, horrifying synchrony. I was the audience and the actor, the victim and the witness, trapped in a crystalline hell of my own making. The last thing I felt, before the world dissolved into pure white-hot pain, was the bizarre sensation of the maze itself melting around me, the warping glass flowing like water, fusing my burning body into a grotesque, shiny sculpture, forever frozen in a prison of 1,000 my own anguished faces. A sweet, smoky death. My name is Leo, and for 10 years I was a firefighter. I've seen things that would curdle a normal man's soul, scenes of chaos and violence etched onto my eyelids. But nothing in my career ever haunted me like what we found in the ashes of the Harwood Carnival. It wasn't the scale of the tragedy that broke me. It was the intimacy of one particular horror. It was the sugar. The call came in as a structure fire, but by the time our engines roared onto the scene, it was a full-blown inferno. The night sky was blotted out by a churning black smoke that glowed a sickly orange from beneath. The air wasn't just hot. It was a physical blow, thick with the stench of burning plastic, wood, and something else. Something sickly sweet. It was the smell of a candy store tossed into a furnace. Burnt sugar and roasting nuts and melting chocolate, a grotesque parody of a carnival treat that made my stomach clench. My crew and I fought our way through the hellscape. We were drenched in sweat and soot, our breaths rasping through our masks. The sounds were a symphony of damnation, the roar of the flames, the snap of collapsing timber, and worst of all, the distant, muffled screams from deep within the blaze, sounds we were powerless to reach. We pushed towards Concession Row, where the fire was raging hottest. The Fry Daddy booth was a column of flame, its vats of oil fueling the blaze. The Candy Corner was a molten, colorful river on the ground. And then there was the Sweet Tooth stall, a quaint little stand shaped like a giant gingerbread house, now being consumed by an insatiable hunger. We fought to get to it, blasting water into the fury, but it was like spitting on the sun. The heat was so intense it forced us back, our coats steaming. We could only watch as the roof of the Sweet Tooth caved in with a groan, sending a shower of sparks and embers into the sky. There was a final, terrible hiss as the flames found something truly combustible inside. It took 2 days for the ashes to cool enough for us to sift through the debris. The carnival was a graveyard of blackened steel and charcoal. The mood was somber, a silent, grim procession through the ruins. We were no longer rescuers. We were archaeologists of agony. When we reached the Sweet Tooth, the smell was still there, clinging to the ruins with a ghostly persistence. It was no longer just sweet. It was cloying, mixed with a foul, greasy undertone that I knew from terrible experience was the smell of burned flesh. We moved carefully, lifting charred beams and chunks of plaster. It was rookie firefighter Jessup who found them. He let out a strangled cry and stumbled back, his face pale beneath the grime. We rushed over, and what we saw there, in the heart of what was once the stall, will be seared into my memory until the day I die. They were huddled inside the husk of a large industrial cotton candy machine. The metal shell was warped and blistered, its cheerful, polished exterior now a scab of black and rust. The couple, we later learned their names, were Arthur and Marie Higgins, married for 40 years, had tried to hide from the fire. They had ripped out the spinning drum and crammed themselves into the tight metal cylinder, seeking refuge. It had become their oven. The heat had been so unimaginably intense that it hadn't just burned them, it had preserved them. Their skeletons were fused together in a final desperate embrace, their bones peeking through a strange, brittle, carbonized shell. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. It was sugar, melted, burned, and recrystallized cotton candy. The entire machine had been filled with the stuff, and the inferno had liquefied it, encasing the two lovers in a grotesque, pinkish-brown cocoon. It was a sarcophagus of spun sugar. Their final moments had been spent trapped in a sticky, sweet tomb, the very substance of their livelihood turning against them in the most horrifying way imaginable. The heat would have been slow, baking them alive inside that metal shell. I could almost hear their muffled screams, smell the sugar on their skin as it caramelized and then burned. We stood there, a group of hardened firefighters, utterly silenced. The image was too profound, too cruel in its symbolism. This couple, who had probably shared a lifetime of sweetness, whose world had been built on the simple joy of a fluffy pink cloud on a paper cone, had been consumed by it. Their love was eternalized in a brittle, horrific sculpture, a mockery of the treat they once sold. I had to turn away. I vomited into the ashes, the taste of bile and soot and that faint, ghostly sweetness mixing in my mouth. We recovered their bodies as carefully as we could, but the shell of sugar shattered at the slightest touch, raining down like blackened, bitter snow. I retired 6 months later. The official reason was a bad back, but the truth is I lost my nerve. I couldn't face another fire. Because now, every time I feel a wave of heat or catch the scent of candy floss at a fairground, I don't see joy. I see that pink crystalline cocoon. I see two skeletons locked in an eternal embrace. And I remember that sometimes the things we love most can become the very things that destroy us. And the smell of burnt sugar will forever be, for me, the smell of death. The fortune teller's final vision. My name is Alara, though for 10 years, the crowds at the Harwood Carnival knew me as Madame Zora, seer of shadows, knower of fates. It was a role, a performance. I'd learned the tricks, the cold reading, the vague pronouncements, the way to hold a client's hand and feel the subtle tremors of their deepest fears. My tent was a sanctuary of manufactured mystery, thick, crimson velvet drapes that swallowed the carnival's noise, the heavy scent of sandalwood and dried sage, and the centerpiece, a flawless crystal ball that was, in truth, just a beautiful piece of glass. It was a prop, a tool to help people see what they already wanted to see. But that night, the night of the fire, the ball felt different. From the moment I'd lit the first incense coil, a deep, gnawing unease had settled in the pit of my stomach. It was a physical pressure, a cold weight that made the air in the tent feel thick and difficult to breathe. The crystal ball, usually just a cool, inert sphere, seemed to hum with a low, sub-audible frequency. When I'd run my fingers over its surface, a static charge had prickled my skin, raising the hairs on my arm. My first client of the evening, a giddy woman asking about a new love, had flinched when she touched the table. "It's so cold in here," she'd remarked, though I was sweating. I couldn't do it. The words, the usual script, felt like lies so profound they would choke me. I made excuses. A sudden migraine, a bad omen in the stars. I turned away a line of people, their faces falling from anticipation to disappointment. I just sat there, in the silence of my tent, my hand resting on the crystal ball, feeling that strange, dissonant hum travel up my arm. It was no longer a prop. It felt like an eye, wide open and staring at a horror I couldn't yet see. The first scream from outside was distant, muffled by the drapes. It was followed by another, closer this time. Then the smell arrived. Not just wood smoke, but the greasy, toxic stench of burning plastic and frying circuitry. The gentle hum of the carnival's generators was swallowed by a new sound, a low, gathering roar, like some great beast waking from a long slumber. My tent flap was ripped open. A family, a man, a woman, and their small boy, stumbled in, their eyes wide with a terror that was instantly horribly real. "The exit. Where's the back exit?" the man gasped, his voice cracking. There was no back exit. We all knew it. More people poured in behind them, a stampede of panicked bodies, their costumes, ghosts, witches, superheroes, now looking like pathetic, ironic jokes. They crushed against my small table, their breath coming in ragged, smoke-choked pants. The air grew hot, unbearably so. The edges of the velvet drapes began to glow with a faint orange light, and through it all I was calm. A terrifying, preternatural stillness settled over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a dreadful, absolute certainty. This was the vision. This was the future I had been refusing to see all night. My hands, almost of their own volition, lifted the crystal ball. It was no longer cool. It was warm, almost feverish. The crowd around me was a maelstrom of screaming, shoving panic, but my world had shrunk to the glass sphere in my hands. I didn't see the future. I saw the present, but it was a present reflected, distorted, and multiplied into a hellish panorama. The crystal ball became a lens, capturing and repeating the agony around me. I saw the father's terrified face, not once, but a dozen times, each reflection a slightly different angle of his despair. I saw the mother clutching her son, and then I saw 100 mothers clutching 100 sons, their faces melting and reforming in the curved glass. The fire was in there too, 1,000 tiny dancing flames reflected from the tent entrance, creating the illusion that the ball itself was filled with a miniature swirling inferno. It was a symphony of anguish, composed in crystal. The screams from outside were echoed by the silent, screaming faces trapped in the ball with me. I saw every pore, every tear, every flicker of hopelessness, an infinite gallery of personal damnation. The ball was showing me the truth I'd been a fraud for so long. There are no separate fates. In the end, we are all just reflections of the same collective terror. The heat became searing. The velvet walls of my tent burst into flame, the fire racing up the drapes with a sound like tearing silk. The crystal ball in my hands grew impossibly hot, the images inside it blurring, swirling into a vortex of fire and flesh. It was no longer just reflecting. It was absorbing. The pain, the fear, the final fleeting thoughts of everyone in that tent. It was all being drawn into that sphere. It couldn't contain it. With a sharp, high-pitched crack, like the shattering of the world itself, the crystal ball exploded in my hands. The force was not physical, but psychic. A silent wave of pure visual horror erupted from it. For a fraction of a second, I didn't feel shards of glass. I felt the final, shattered memories of a dozen people imprinted on the air. And then the physical reality caught up. 1,000,000 razor-sharp fragments, superheated and glowing with stolen fire, shot outwards in a blinding cloud. They mixed with the falling, burning canvas of the tent, a beautiful, deadly shower of glass and ember. The last thing I ever saw was not darkness. It was a kaleidoscope. 1,000 glittering shards, each one reflecting a final, frozen moment. A screaming mouth, a burning hand, a child's wide eye, all tumbling through the air in a beautiful, terrible, final vision. Madame Zora's last. Sight was not of the future, but of a broken, glittering present, forever sharp, forever burning, and forever reflected in the eyes of the dead. Trapped in the Funhouse. My name is Josh, and I was the guy who never took anything seriously. That's why, when my girlfriend Chloe suggested we check out the Funhouse at the Harwood Carnival, I just had to make it a competition. "Last one through the barrel roll buys the funnel cakes," I'd shouted, already shoving my friends, Liam and Maya, towards the garish, leering clown face that served as the entrance. We were 17, invincible, and dripping with the cheap, metallic bravado that only Halloween night can provide. The Funhouse was a masterpiece of disorientation. The second we stepped inside, the world tilted. The floorboards beneath our feet shifted and rolled, forcing us to stumble and clutch at the walls, which were covered in a sticky, flaking paint. Blasts of cold, musty air shot from hidden vents, making us yelp and laugh. Distorted mirrors stretched us into grotesque, skinny giants and squashed us into waddling dwarves. The air was thick with the smell of old wood, machine oil, and the cloying sweetness of spilled soda. And underneath it all, a soundtrack of manic, recorded laughter and the occasional ghostly boo played on an endless, maddening loop. We made our way deeper, past the spinning tunnel with its dizzying black and white spirals, past the glass bridge that vibrated unnervingly. Our goal was the legendary barrel roll, a long, dark, cylindrical tunnel that you had to crawl through while it spun around you. It was the grand finale of the Funhouse. The entrance to the barrel roll was a black, rubber-flapped maw. We could hear the deep, mechanical groan of the cylinder turning from within. Ready to lose? I grinned at Chloe. She rolled her eyes but smiled, her face pale in the weird, pulsing strobe light. Liam went first, then Maya. I gave Chloe a playful push and followed her in. Inside, it was pure, chaotic fun. The darkness was absolute, a velvet blackness that pressed against your eyeballs. The tunnel floor, the walls, the ceiling, everything was spinning. We were tumbling over each other, a knot of limbs and laughter, completely disoriented. You'd try to crawl forward, only to have the world spin and send you sliding sideways into a friend. The recorded laughter from outside was muffled in here, a distant, crazy giggle that perfectly matched our giddy panic. Then, the lights died. The spinning didn't stop. If anything, it seemed to get faster. The power failure killed the lights, but the barrel roll, driven by its own heavy momentum, kept turning. Our laughter died in our throats, replaced by confused murmurs. Josh? Chloe's voice was small, right next to my ear. It's just a power outage, I said, my own voice sounding hollow in the cramped, rotating darkness. They'll get it back on. That's when the new sound started. A low, distant roar, like a freight train approaching. At the same time, a wave of heat washed over us, so intense and sudden it felt like opening an oven. The air in the tunnel, once cool and musty, became a searing gasp. The pressurized air vents that had been blowing cold air now began to scream, sucking in the superheated atmosphere from outside. We were no longer tumbling in fun. We were scrambling, a blind, frantic clawing for a purchase that didn't exist. The spinning cylinder became a cement mixer, and we were the doomed contents. Liam was shouting, Maya was crying, and Chloe's hand was clamped onto my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Then the fire found us. It didn't creep in. It shot through the tunnel. Fed by the pressurized vents, it traveled like a lit fuse, a roaring, oxygen-rich blast of pure flame that filled the entire cylinder in an instant. The darkness vanished, replaced by a blinding orange-white inferno. The heat was beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just hot. It was consuming. It sucked the air from our lungs and replaced it with fire. I felt my hair crisp, my nylon jacket melt and fuse to my skin. The recorded laughter from the Funhouse's sound system was still playing, the cheerful, looping giggle now a demonic soundtrack to our immolation. Our screams were lost, completely drowned out by the roar of the flames and that insane, unchanging laughter. We became a single burning mass, our bodies slamming against the metal walls of the spinning cylinder. There was no up, no down, only fire and spinning and that terrible mocking laughter. I could feel the others around me, their movements becoming frantic, then sluggish, then still. Chloe's grip on my arm went limp. The last thing I was aware of was the smell. The smell of my own burning flesh, mixed with melting plastic and that sickly sweet carnival scent. My final coherent thought was one of absurd, bitter irony. We were trapped in the ultimate joke, a punchline delivered by a roaring flame in a spinning, laughing coffin. The darkness returned at the edges of my vision, a final, merciful blackness that had nothing to do with the power outage, and everything to do with the end. They tell me they found our bodies piled at the far end of the barrel roll, a fused and blackened tangle of limbs pressed against the sealed emergency hatch, our final desperate attempt to escape forever frozen in charcoal and ash. But sometimes in my deepest dreams, I'm still in there. I can still feel the spin, I can still hear the laughter, and I can still feel the heat, waiting for me to wake up and remember that for us, the fun never ended. It just burned. The silent scream of the strongman, my name isn't important, but his was Bruno. To the wide-eyed kids and skeptical fathers at the Harwood Carnival, he was Bruno the Beast, the strongest man in 3 states. To me, the scrawny kid who ran the ring toss booth next to his stage, he was just Bruno, a quiet mountain of a man with hands the size of catcher's mitts and a voice so soft you had to lean in to hear it. His act was simple, timeless. He'd bend iron bars, smash stacks of bricks, and let burly volunteers swing sledgehammers into his stomach, which was as hard and unyielding as an oak tree. He never grunted, never strained theatrically. He just performed with a quiet, effortless grace that made his strength seem almost magical. The night of the fire, he'd just finished his last show. The crowd had dispersed, buzzing with that post-performance adrenaline, and Bruno was wiping the sweat from his brow with a faded red bandana. I was packing up my plush toys when the first scream cut through the carnival's cacophony. It wasn't a fun scream. This was a blade of pure, undiluted terror. We both turned. A plume of thick black smoke, glowing orange from within, was already coiling into the sky from the direction of the food court. The smell hit us a second later, a toxic cocktail of burning cooking oil, melting plastic, and ancient dry timber. The carnival's cheerful noise curdled into a single, panicked roar. People became a river of fear, flowing and crashing against the game booths. I was frozen, my arms full of cheap teddy bears, watching the chaos unfold. Bruno didn't panic. He stood on his stage, his eyes scanning the stampede, a look of intense concentration on his broad, simple face. That's when we heard it, a woman's scream. Sharp and close, coming from the souvenir tent directly across from us. The tent, a flimsy structure of canvas and wooden poles, was already sagging, its entrance blocked by a collapsed support beam. Trapped underneath were a young mother and her little boy, no more than 5, dressed as a tiny astronaut. She was frantically pushing against the heavy timber, but it was like an ant trying to lift a twig. The fire was racing along the tent's roof, dropping embers like fiery rain around them. Bruno moved. He didn't run. He strode, a force of nature cutting through the current of panic. He pushed past me, his sheer bulk creating a wake of calm. He didn't say a word to the sobbing mother. He just planted his feet, took a deep breath that expanded his massive chest, and slid his hands under the beam. I have never seen a human being exert themselves like that. The veins on his neck and temples bulged, thick as cables. The muscles in his back and shoulders knotted into terrifying sculpted relief beneath his thin tank top. A low guttural groan, a sound that seemed to come from the very center of the earth, rumbled from his chest. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, with a splintering crack, the beam began to rise. Inch by agonizing inch, he lifted the immense weight, his entire body trembling with the strain. "Go! Now!" I shouted, my own voice a shrill, useless thing. The woman didn't need telling. She scrambled out, dragging her crying son by the hand. They vanished into the smoky chaos, 2 more faces swallowed by the night. They never looked back. It was then that the main support of the tent, weakened by the fire, gave way with a groan. It came down in a cascade of burning canvas and sparks, collapsing directly behind Bruno, completely sealing off his only escape route. He was trapped in a small, shrinking circle of hell, the beam still held aloft in his hands. The fire closed in. It climbed the walls of the surrounding booths. It licked at the stage he'd just performed on. It began to caress his boots. The heat was unimaginable. I could feel it blistering my skin from 20 feet away. I screamed his name, a raw, desperate sound. "Bruno! Drop it! Run!" But he couldn't. The exit was gone. And Bruno was not a man who ran. He never screamed. He never cried out. As the flames climbed his legs, as his pants smoldered and then burst into fire, as the skin on his arms blackened and blistered under the searing heat, he just stood there. His eyes were squeezed shut, his jaw locked in a vice-like clench. His muscles, those incredible muscles, continued to strain, holding the beam aloft even as the fire began to consume him. It was a final silent act of defiance. This was his stage, and this was his last, greatest feat of strength, to stand his ground. I was forced back by the intensifying heat, the smoke choking me. The last I saw of Bruno, he was a silhouette wreathed in fire, a colossus holding up a world that was crumbling to ash around him. His arms were still upraised, a statue of impossible will, refusing to yield even to the inevitable. They found him that way days later, after the ashes had cooled. A skeletal frame, charred black, still standing. The bones of his arms were fused in an eternal lift, the blackened beam resting across his shoulders. The fire had taken his life, his flesh, his voice, but it could not make him fall. And in my dreams, he's still there. A silent, burning giant holding up the weight of that terrible night, a permanent monument to the strength that killed him. The prize no one won. My name is Eli. For 40 years, I was the keeper of the ring toss booth at the Harwood Carnival. They called me Lucky Eli, though the name was more for the customers than for me. My life was a simple, gentle orbit around that small, brightly painted stall. It was a kingdom of primary colors, the sharp, clean smell of fresh sawdust, and the soft, hopeful faces of the plush toys that lined my shelves. A rainbow of teddy bears, grinning dragons, and unicorns with manes of iridescent thread. The prize everyone wanted was the king dragon, a massive purple and gold beast that took up half the back wall. To win it, you had to ring the far post bottle 3 times in a row. It was a game of chance I'd rigged to be just generous enough to keep hope alive. I loved the children most. I loved the way their eyes would widen at the wall of prizes, the serious concentration as they weighed the wooden ring in their hand, the triumphant leap when one clinked perfectly onto a bottleneck. I'd always make a show of it, letting them pick their prize with the solemnity of a king choosing a crown. For a few dollars, I could sell them a memory of pure, uncomplicated victory. It was a good life, a quiet life. The night it happened was our busiest, Halloween. The air was crisp and alive with laughter and the sugary scent of candy floss. My booth was a magnet for little ghosts and goblins, their tiny hands clutching the rings, their parents smiling indulgently. I'd just helped a little girl in a witch costume win a small pink unicorn. Her smile was a flash of light in the twilight, and I felt that familiar, warm satisfaction. The first change was the smell. Underneath the sugar and the chill, a new scent unfurled, a greasy chemical stink that made my nose wrinkle. Then the lights on the Ferris wheel flickered and died. The cheerful carnival music sputtered into silence, and in that sudden void, a new sound rushed in, a low, gathering roar, like a distant waterfall. It was the sound of panic, and it was getting closer. I stood on the step stool behind my counter, peering over the top of my booth. What I saw stole the breath from my lungs. A wall of fire, taller than any tent, was marching through the heart of the carnival. It moved with a terrible, hungry speed, consuming game booths and food stalls as if they were made of paper. The air grew thick and hot, carrying embers that glowed like a swarm of angry fireflies. A tide of people broke against my booth, screaming, shoving, their faces masks of pure terror. They were funneling into a deadly bottleneck between my stall and the strength test game, a narrow corridor that was quickly becoming a tomb. And on the other side of that corridor, trapped against a locked service gate, was a group of children. They were separated from the main flow of the crowd by a curtain of flame that had erupted from a popcorn stand. I saw the little witch I'd just helped, her pointed hat knocked askew, clutching her mother's leg. I saw a cowboy, a superhero, a ballerina. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with a confusion that was swiftly turning to terror. My mind, an old man's mind, moved slowly through the syrup of my own fear. I had to do something. I had to help. My eyes fell on my prizes, my beautiful soft plush prizes. An idea, desperate and foolish, sparked in my mind. They could use them. They could hold them over their heads, use them as shields against the falling embers, something to cover their faces from the smoke. "Catch!" I yelled, my voice a reedy squawk against the inferno's roar. I grabbed the first thing my hands found, a large white teddy bear. I threw it over the wall of flame, a soft, arcing parcel of hope. It never reached them. The moment it passed through the curtain of fire, the synthetic fur ignited. It didn't just catch fire. It exploded into a ball of flame, its cheerful black eyes melting, its fluffy body becoming a comet of napalm. It landed among the children not as a shield, but as a meteor of death. I stared, uncomprehending for a second, my mind refusing to accept the horror I had just unleashed. No. That wasn't right. Frantically, I grabbed another, a green dinosaur. I threw it, the same result. A screaming fireball, raining molten plastic and burning stuffing onto the very people I was trying to save. I was a pitcher on a hellish mound, and every throw was a strike of pure damnation. I grabbed the king dragon, the grand prize, and hurled its majestic, oversized body across the gap. It became the most terrible of all, a massive, writhing serpent of fire that crashed down amongst them. I had turned my sanctuary of joy into an arsenal of atrocity. The very symbols of childhood comfort and victory were now the instruments of their agony. The children's screams, which I could no longer hear over the fire, were painted clearly on their faces as they tried to bat away the burning stuffed animals that clung to their costumes and their hair. I don't remember the fire reaching my booth. I only remember the final, silent tableau I witnessed before the smoke blinded me. The narrow corridor was now a carpet of fire, and scattered across it, like grisly offerings, were the scorched, skeletal remains of my prizes. And nestled among them, curled into small final balls, were the shapes of the children. The little witch, the cowboy, the ballerina. They were surrounded by the blackened corpses of the toys they had come to win. A nightmarish still life of promises broken and innocence incinerated. They say I was the only one pulled alive from that section of the carnival. They call it a miracle. I call it a sentence. I live in a silent apartment now, surrounded by nothing soft. I can still feel the weight of those plush toys in my hands. I can still see their cheerful, embroidered smiles transforming into shrieking mouths of flame. I was lucky Eli, and in the end, the only prize I ever gave away was death.